So, Bill Cassidy, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be with you today.
So, if you might indulge us, how did you get your career started in this industry?
Well, my career got started in transportation and logistics in 1984. And, I should stress my career is as a journalist writing about transportation and logistics rather than being a practitioner. But I've been around, various parts of the industry ever since then. So that's almost, I hate to say it, it's almost 4 decades. Don't know how that happened, but it did. And it's been a great time, a great run. I cover mostly trucking for the Journal of Commerce, but also get to write about international logistics and intermodal rail and technology to an extent as well.
Excellent, excellent. So, what keeps you excited about your work every day?
Well, I mean, it's ever changing. As you know, we're heading into almost February 2023. It will be February by the time everyone is listening to us, I think. And, we're all looking at what's happening next. 2022 was a historic year, so was 2021. We've had a run of years where, we used to say, well, this is going to be an unusual year, or this is going to be, a year that is somehow set off from others. Well, we've had a run of those. I can't think of when we've had, what used to be called a normal year in the past couple of years. The pandemic changed all that, supply chain disruption. We had peak volumes last year, though we saw rates begin to decline ahead of any decline in demand. Now we're seeing 2023, possibly a recession in the US, possibly a global recession. That seems even more likely. But we're also seeing signs of a coming rebound. And I think that's important to people. And, people will be looking at how they can win at that rebound, how they can position themselves for it. And, that's what, keeps me interested and active, in this field every day.
Time flies when you're having fun, right? You mentioned previously 4 decades. Where did time go? I mean, so much change, it would be boring and it wouldn't have gone by so fast, right?
Right. When I started, the Interstate Commerce Commission was still regulating trucking. You had you had any number of large carriers that you could name who are no longer with us today. 3PLs really didn't exist as, a company or a model. Technology was pretty rudimentary compared to what we use today. So there's been a huge amount of change, and the change is ongoing. I think that we're likely to see more change in the 2020s than we have seen in the past couple of decades. And I think that's largely because of technology. I think it's going to be a bigger driver of our businesses and how we do business as we move deeper into this decade.
Couldn't agree more. So working for the JOC and being a reporter, right? And how are you and your business really adding value to the supply chain?
Hopefully, what we're doing is providing information to our audience, which is largely the shipper, the importer of goods, also the exporter, and also the carriers too. But hopefully, we're providing them with information that they can use to formulate better plans, to improve their businesses, to stay on top of a fast changing marketplace. We want to have what they call actionable data, data and information that people can actually take and use to accomplish a goal or to meet an objective. So that's where we see the value we provide. I mean, we consider ourselves not to be a media company, but a intelligence company, and in particular, a shipping intelligence company.
So what is one of the biggest challenges you've experienced throughout your career, and how did you learn from it?
Biggest challenges I've experienced throughout my career. Um, I mean, there's been a huge change in the business that I'm in as a reporter. At one level, what I do now is the same that I did in 1984. I call people, I contact people, I ask them for information. They tell me or not, and I tend to write stories based on that. It's a pretty sweet deal overall. But the way I do it, the way we do it has changed so much. And especially in the past 5 years under the pandemic. Up until the pandemic, I had spent my career working in an office, commuting into a city every day, going to a downtown office, whether in New York or in Washington, D.C., working with the staff and, you know, interacting with people on a first person basis. The pandemic, of course, changed that for everyone. I've been working from home since really March of 2020 and had to learn a whole new way of dealing with people, of people, reaching out to people. And I have to say, it's worked very well. I mean, we're doing it right now, recording this podcast through Zoom. Not something that we really did before 2020. And, now it's part of the everyday. So I'd say that is a big challenge that we've met and have dealt with. Um, Keeping in touch with people in this environment has been a challenge. Um, I'd also say that the change in technology overall in my career has been pretty big. I started out using a electronic typewriter, and then got into a green screen computer, and I had a TRS-80 laptop box that had acoustic couplers you could put a phone into, one of the old phones with the two round ends. Hard to imagine
Yeah.
those anymore because I haven't seen them in years. But yeah, and I would plug that into the computer and it would transmit back to the data bank at the publishing company. We've gone through so many changes in how we use technology that it's almost difficult to think about how we started out and where we are today. We just assume, we've always had these things like, cell phones, smartphones. A friend of mine, his son said, "Dad, why do we say dial a phone?" And he had to explain that, well, there used to be actual dials you would put your finger into, and it's like, wow, just, blew his son's mind. So there's a lot that we've, been challenged by and have met the challenges in terms of technology and the advancement of technology in recent years. I think that, one really interesting change over the totality of my career, I started at a time when we were just moving away in this country from price and service regulation. I mean, we still have plenty of regulation at the federal and state level, but it's mostly concerned with things like safety and health. It's concerned with some, issues of operations, which is why, safety and health, again, you have driver hours of service regulations, right? And now we have ELDs and ELD regulations. So we have electronic driver log mandates. So when I started out, you had some of that, but you had a lot of regulation of price and service. And that went away entirely in the 1980s through trucking deregulation, rail deregulation. But it's interesting how, I mean, just around that time, there's this period where we really switched from a very different view of the marketplace to the very competitive open market view that we have today. And I find talking to people who are somewhat younger than me, which is most people these days, it's often difficult to describe, why that was so different back in the day. But, those changes opened up the way for the transportation system we have today, for the supply chain we have today. Supply chains, of course, became global, which they necessarily weren't in the 1970s or 1980s. You think about the rise of the third-party logistics sector. which, really occurred in the 1990s, and technology helped enable that. And you get to the point where we are today, and it really has been an incredible, you know, series of decades. I didn't mean to reflect so much on my life here, but yeah, I mean, the past 40 years of logistics and technology have been incredible, and I think we're going to see even more incredible things in the next 10 years.
Excellent. So, I mean, what are one of your biggest accomplishments that you've experienced throughout your career?
My biggest accomplishments, keeping a job. Hey, that's not bad. But, more than that, I'd say I've continued to try to learn as times changed. Certainly I'm fascinated by this business and by all the changes we see coming in this business. I'm fascinated by how the economy works. I'm a fan of transportation history. So, I wouldn't say proud, but I am happy with the fact that I have been able to continue to learn and have, not let myself stagnate in the sense of here's what I'm interested in, here's what I'm doing. Uh, in terms of individual stories, it's kind of hard to pick something out. I was really happy a few years ago. This goes back to probably 10 years ago. I had the opportunity to do an interview with the founder of Overnight Transportation, Harwood Cochran. And Overnight, of course, became UPS Freight. It's now T-Force Freight, owned by TFI International in Canada. And that was a chance to sit down and talk with someone whose experience ranged from, the days of, horse wagon carts, where he was bringing milk into Richmond, Virginia in a horse wagon with probably some moonshine underneath the seat, right to our contemporary world of LTL and truckload and 3PL companies. So that was a really interesting challenge and a nice accomplishment. But beyond that, I think overall I am happy with the way I've been able to provide people, I think, with pertinent information and data that challenges them, and I'm challenged in sometimes providing it and figuring out what's making things tick, and literally helping people. That's what we're here to do.
For sure, for sure. I love how you started off the comment with, start off answering the question with keeping a job, taking a look at, we might be running into a recession, and all the layoffs within the tech sector. I think we're starting to see a little bit now in the logistics sector as well. But we'll see. That leads me into my next question. Fast forward to the future. What are you looking forward to the most?
I am looking forward to seeing us come out of the current economic downturn that we're in, whether it's a recession or a freight recession. The good news about that is these things end eventually, and we have an upturn, an uptick, a rebound. I'm going to call it a rebound. I do think that we are heading towards a rebound later in 2023. That's not something that I've come up with because I'm somehow smart. It's because I talk to smart people and they tell me this. But yeah, in general, the most of the sources I talk to, the economists and forecasters who work for S&P Global, which is the owner of the Journal of Commerce, I mean, they tend to think that we are heading into a mild recession, which will probably last through the first half of 2023, and then a moderate rebound or growth period in the latter part of the year, which will give us, growth for the entire year. Strangely enough, we are probably looking at, I think that S&P Global has projected, when all the numbers are crunched, the U.S. economy will have expanded 0.5% in 2022. So despite how difficult 2022 was in many ways, especially the second half of the year, we had overall expansion. And it looks like we're going to see the same thing in 2024 with maybe 1.4% growth in GDP at the end of the year. And that's, even including a recession perhaps in the first two quarters. It's really hard to say. We could be in a recession now. It could have begun in the last quarter. Well, it didn't begin in the last quarter because, excuse me, we had 2.9% GDP growth, according to the first reading by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Freight recession, yeah, we have seen freight volumes decline since last August. So it looks like we probably are in what could be called a freight recession. But even there, economists and forecasters see that bottoming out and improving as we get deeper into the year. So I am looking forward to that. And I think many of our audience members are looking forward to that too.
For sure. And I think you guys have some of the best information at your fingertips to monitor the freight, right? Coming inbound, outbound with what's the program called? Import Genius or Peers?
Peers, right. That's originally the Port Import Export Reporting Service. We still have that. We have a lot of other data thanks to our friends at S&P Global that we can look at in terms of economic forecasts. We became part of S&P Global last year when the acquisition of IHS Markit, which had owned us, was completed by S&P Global. So that's been great in terms of providing us with more exposure and access to data as well.
Excellent. So before we conclude, do you have any closing statements you'd like to share? And what is the best way for our listeners to get a hold of you if they've got any questions?
Sure. Best way to get a hold of me is at bill.cassidy@spglobal.com. You can also go on to joc.com and you'll find my articles with my email, pretty much everywhere on the website. In terms of closing ideas or thoughts, I do want to say I know a lot of people, are nervous about the economy at this point. Concerned about what a recession might mean, about layoffs. I'd like to just say to people, things are better than you might think. I'm probably a glass half full kind of person,
Like it to me.
and there's a lot, it seems to me, well, I do think that if you're following the news every day, the number of articles forecasting economic doom and gloom have dropped a bit. The number that's receded a bit, I think, because we had a strong fourth quarter economic performance comparatively. Inflation is a bit lower, it's coming down slowly. So that's also, I think, giving people some more hope that we're past the worst of the economic downturn. But yeah, I think that it's easy to forget that number one, economic cycles aren't a natural cycle. They're human based. We create, boom times and bust times, often by decisions we make that trigger one or the other. The recession that we are either in or may be heading for or may avoid, there's still that option out there, though it's a smaller one. That recession is being engineered by the Federal Reserve System in order to reduce inflation. So the idea is what's worse, high inflation or low growth or a contraction in growth. So we will come through this period of slower growth or contraction in growth and see a moderate increase coming out of that. And I think the most important thing that we can do at this point is begin to think about how we position ourselves for that rebound when it comes. And, just an example, UPS came out with its earnings today. And well, I'm sure that, there'll be, complaints in the newspapers and, about, okay, certain things are lower than they were a year ago. Well, a year ago, 2021 fourth quarter was probably the best quarter for them ever. They still had more than $100 billion in revenue in 2022. So pretty big. Their profits are still healthy. But I think the important thing that they are doing is they are looking at what they can control, controlling what they can control now, and planning for that rebound. And they're investing in technology, both in vehicles and in facilities. They're looking at how to bring more customers on board electronically through a digital access platform. So they've got a plan that says, if we have to hunker down now and get through a rough patch, let's do it. And let's make investments now that'll position us to be even better when we come out of it. And I advise everyone to think about how they can do the same.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Last but not least, do we want to talk about TPM at all?
TPM is a great topic to talk about. It's coming up at the end of February, the last week of February in Long Beach, California. That is our annual conference focusing on international cargo and maritime. I'll be there. I'll be talking about trucking and drayage and the inland leg of the international maritime cargo journey. We also have the JOC Inland Distribution Conference in Chicago, which will be held where it was last year at the Marriott North downtown, and we'll be there September 25th through 27th. So I'm looking forward to being back in Chicago again and seeing everyone from last year and lots of new people too.
We're looking forward to seeing you again as well. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Michael, and look forward to seeing you all again in Chicago and at the upcoming CTC events.
If you want to learn more about the Traffic Club, please visit our website at www.traffic-club.org. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of Traffic Jam.